Hello and welcome to Punctual Politics. I'm your host, Dawson Iasillo, and we have a lot to get into today. Across the United States and beyond, the headlines paint a picture of uncertainty, pressure, and deep division. From Washington's prolonged government shutdown and sweeping layoffs in the tech sector, to a new military campaign in the Pacific, and the most powerful hurricane of the year. This is a moment where nearly every front seems to be in flux. We start in Washington, where the government shutdown is now entering its fourth week, making it one of the longest in U.S. history. Essential services continue to run, but millions of federal employees are either furloughed or working without pay. The shutdown has stemmed from a budget standoff between President Trump's administration and Congress, with disputes over spending priorities and executive authority taking center stage. And one of the most contentious issues, food assistance. Last night, the Trump administration announced that emergency funds cannot be used to continue the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. That decision effectively freezes benefits for millions of Americans who rely on food stamps and could deepen food insecurity nationwide. Just weeks after major cuts to food stamps program, the administration has also quietly ended the federal government's annual State of Hunger report, a publication that for decades has tracked hunger and food insecurity in America. Economists warned that the combined efforts of the shutdown, cuts to SNAP, and widespread layoffs could trigger a spike in poverty and hunger, especially as food banks across the country face shortages. Beyond the policy disputes, the country is seeing a surge of civic unrest. Last week marked the No King's Day protest, a loosely organized nationwide demonstration focused on opposing authoritarianism and the concentration of presidential power. According to organizers and local authorities, this protest was the largest in American history, with more than 2,600 protests nationwide and an estimated 5 million participants to take the streets. From New York to Los Angeles and in small towns across the Midwest, protesters carried signs reading "Power to the People," and corruption, and democracy over dictatorship. While the demonstrations were mostly peaceful, there were reports of clashes between protesters and police in several major cities. The administration responded sharply. President Trump said Monday that he's willing to send more than just the National Guard into U.S. cities if unrest continues, though he didn't clarify what that might entail. Critics are warning that such rhetoric could further inflame tensions between federal law enforcement and local communities. Meanwhile, a top Border Patrol officer in Chicago has been ordered to appear in court following allegations of aggressive and unlawful tactics used by agents during recent raids. Civil rights groups argue the case reflects a broader culture of impunity within federal enforcement agencies, one that's been expanding during the shutdown with limited oversight and accountability. Abroad, the administration's foreign policy is also under scrutiny. In the Pacific, the U.S. military confirmed strikes on 4 boats late Monday night, claiming the vessels were part of a regional drug trafficking network. The strikes killed 14 people, according to Pentagon officials. The latest move in what they're calling a ramp-up campaign against narcotics operations tied to organized crime in Southeast Asia. Critics worry the operation could further destabilize the region, especially given the limited transparency around these missions. At the same time, President Trump is continuing his Asia tour, meeting with newly elected Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, a conservative leader known for her hardline views on security and trade. The two reportedly discussed strengthening military cooperation and countering China's growing influence in the Pacific. Back in the Middle East, tensions are once again rising. Just days after a ceasefire agreement in Gaza, Israel launched new airstrikes, targeting what officials described as Hamas military sites. The strikes came after Hamas suspended the return of hostages, accusing Israel of breaking the terms of the ceasefire by planning additional operations. Regional leaders are urging restraint, but with communication between the two sides breaking down, the situation remains volatile. And humanitarian groups are warning that civilians could once again bear the brunt of renewed fighting. Here at home, President Trump's legal battles continue. His team filed an appeal of his New York hush money conviction, seeking to overturn the verdict on grounds of what they call judicial bias and political interference. Legal analysts say that the appeal could stretch well into 2026, and it's likely to remain a major flashpoint in next year's election season. And in the private sector, there's more economic turbulence. Amazon announced plans to lay off up to 30,000 corporate employees, roughly 10% of its white-collar workforce, beginning today. The cuts are part of a broader restructuring effort amid slowing sales growth and rising competition in the AI and logistics sectors. For context, Amazon employs over 350,000 corporate workers worldwide, and the layoffs are expected to affect offices in Seattle, New York, London, and several international hubs. Market analysts say it's one of the largest corporate downsizing waves in U.S. history, second only to the layoffs that followed the COVID-19 recession. For employees already stretched by the shutdown and rising costs of living, it's another blow to household stability. And as political storms rage, a literal one is gathering strength off the Atlantic. Hurricane Melissa has intensified into a Category 5 hurricane, packing sustained winds of 175 miles per hour, making it one of the strongest storms ever recorded in Atlantic Basin. Forecasters are warning that Melissa could make landfall along the southeastern U.S. coast by late Wednesday or early Thursday. Evacuations are underway in parts of Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. FEMA says preparations have been complicated by, you guessed it, the ongoing government shutdown, which has left many emergency response programs understaffed and underfunded. Experts say that the storm could cause tens of billions in damage if it hits major population centers. And it's another reminder of how vulnerable U.S. infrastructure remains in an era of increasingly powerful hurricanes. So let's take a step back. A government in gridlock, a nation divided in the streets, a global stage on edge, and a planet showing its raw force through nation's fury. A snapshot of a world balancing on multiple frontiers: political, economic, environmental, and moral. It's easy to see each story as separate. A shutdown here, a hurricane there, protests in the street, strikes across oceans, but together they reveal something larger. A moment where power, responsibility, and survival are all being tested. As we move into the final stretch of our year, the question isn't just about how the government or corporations will respond, but how the public, ordinary people will adapt, organize, and push for the kind of leadership they believe that the country needs. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe to the Daily Nebraskan YouTube. We'll be back next week with more developing news from the week ahead. See you then.